Hey folks, welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. Thank you for tuning in as always. I appreciate you being here. We've got a good episode lined up today. My guest is actually on her way to the studios right now. I'm recording this before the conversation happens, so there's a chance it could completely go off the rails. That hasn't happened yet, but there's always a first time for everything, I suppose. So my guest on the show today is comedian, writer, musical comedian extraordinaire, Marcia Belsky. Marcia, have not seen in a long time. I would see her on occasion doing sets around New York City, and then when I checked back in with her, she was doing her Handmaid's Tale parody musical at the Kennedy Center, which, if you're unfamiliar with the Kennedy Center, to perform there, I put that as a very prestigious accomplishment. And she's also been the center of a lot of, I don't know if controversy is exactly the right word, but a lot of a heated debate around the context of free speech on the internet and specifically Facebook. If you Google her name and then Facebook, you'll find out a lot about that. I imagine that's probably going to come up at a certain point, but that's actually not really what I'm curious about, because that's not really what I do on this show. I certainly have my thoughts on the world, but I rather save that for like a face-to-face conversation where I can have the space to be wrong and think about something critically without my initial impression being etched in the public conscience. So I'm interested to see what kind of a conversation we have, because I know that Marcia and I have at least some interests in common. We're both comedians. We both do music. And I'm interested to see where this goes. And also, I want to learn about what it was like to do a show at the Kennedy Center, because that sounds pretty spectacular. Coming from the Maryland, D.C. Area, if I ever get to perform at the Kennedy Center, that'll be like my homecoming victory lap if I ever get to do that. So thank you guys for listening. We'll get to my interview with Marcia in a second. If you enjoy this podcast and you want to help me get it known and bigger, I would certainly appreciate that. We are on iTunes and Stitcher. You can subscribe or leave a review. Add us to your faves playlist. That helps the show grow. And I'm on Twitter at Comic Will Carey. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at AwesomeDPod. I have new episodes every Monday, and I thank you guys very much for checking, either continuing to listen week to week, or if this is your first time and you're taking a risk chatting with me, that means a lot. So thank you. There's a lot of things to hear, see, and experience on the internet. So I appreciate that you've filled your head with my thoughts, if only for a little while. And let's go now to my chat with comedian Marcia Belsky. Yeah, like Silver Springs is like the I'm from DC. I say I'm from DC, but I'm not really from DC kind of spot.
Yeah. My mom and my aunt are actually from DC, but my aunt raised her kids in Silver Spring. So they're like, so my cousin's not from DC.
Yeah. I it's always that, it's kind of a tricky thing, like, because I never want to like misrepresent like where I'm from, but I'm from such a small town that I just say Baltimore because it's close and
exactly.
and
everyone
it's
just
near
wants to know
went
the
college.
closest place. They don't actually care.
Yeah, exactly.
I yell, so I'm like trying to figure out. This will probably be good.
Yeah.
This will be good. Yeah.
Yeah, you're
These
good.
are powerful mics.
Yeah, I love these microphones. I feel like a real radio professional talking on
it
these.
Does look like I did like this one weird show, Marketplace, and I didn't realize it was like such a big show. And I walk in and he has like this whole like motherboard set up, and like I was like, oh shit. And I'm like in this like spotlighted chair, and he's in a separate room, and I'm like, this is crazy.
Oh wow, that's
was
old
intense.
school.
Yeah.
Well, I always think about Terry Gross. She's not even in the same state as
the people she's
interviewing. They're in like a
That's why
different
it's so
studio.
detached.
They're in a different studio. And that's something I always wonder too, because I've done a couple of phone interviews, and I always wonder, like, I feel like it's like very I feel like you have more personal conversation when you're like in the same room as someone.
But someone who's like a celebrity broadcaster, like I think doesn't want that. They're like, I don't want to be with people. Like they're like, we'll just talk over the phone.
Yeah, they get to like that Daniel Plainview era where they're just like shooting bowling pins.
Yeah, they don't care.
Their own private.
They're like, what's that? Your life
alley.
was ruined. Jail. Cool. Let's put it on air. Don't talk to me.
It's kind of a rote. I feel like that's I feel like there's too many of those. I feel like the show business in general, even for people who I think are successful, is so close to like absolute disaster. Everyone's so close to disaster at any one time.
Yeah, very close to a breakdown at any moment. And then once you like get into it, that's what's weird is like, I don't know if I maybe never was as stable a person as I thought I was, but when I first got into comedy, I was like, compared to a lot of these people, I think that I'm remarkably well. I think that I'm pretty stable. But then now I'm like 9 or 10 years in, and it's starting to get to me or something where I'm like, I can see why people are one bad day away from a public breakdown. Like, I didn't really understand that before, and now I'm like, I just want to make it to 50 without a filmed breakdown.
Yeah. or a podcast episode that gets brought up every 3 to 4 years that you have to explain the context of to a whole group of people.
Going viral is truly the worst, whether it's good or bad, because it's going to turn bad if it's good. Like, it's just like, there's something about, like, when I got retweeted by Kumia, his people, his like men's rights weird freaks. And it was like, I looked at my Twitter and all of a sudden I have 100 people tweeting at me just the most insane things. And I'm like, I'm good.
Right.
I'm good on that. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially because like, I feel like you in particular have a pretty unique perspective on that, because I see your name come up in news articles about comedy and the internet a lot the past couple of years.
I know. I feel weird about that sometimes because, like, I did just stand up for so long because I started stand up when I was 19 in Portland, Oregon. And that was really, like, my only avenue. And then I came to New York and I was going out to the mics every night and then also posting these jokes on Facebook, like, about, like, this female militia. And, like, I just thought it was kind of funny to show people, like, okay, if they think feminism is this thing, let me just kind of joke about what that would actually look like and be super over the top. And like, so one of the things was I had this photo of me as a truly like cherub looking child with a speech bubble that said kill all men. And like everybody thought it was funny, like whoever, like men, women, whatever. And it was like an obvious joke. And then it got removed from Facebook, which later became kind of this whole thing. And so now when you Google me, it's like Marcia, kill all men, Belsky. And the people who write it up don't put the full context because it became this whole winding story with Facebook, which like people can look up. And they'll just write a really reductive line like, Marcia Belsky is a comedian that likes to call men scum on the internet, period. And then it's like, well, that doesn't sound very funny. And and it's hard because people don't really look further. And I'm like, I understand the type of humor you're talking about where like a girl just goes on stage and it's like, kill all men, end of joke. But it's like, whatever, not to toot my own horn. Like, I do work a little harder than that. That's not my joke. That's not the punchline for me. Like,
right.
So then it just kind of sucks that I feel like one time I was about to get this. I always talk about a corporate gig is like probably not going to work out if they Google me, because one time I was supposed to do this thing that was going to pay pretty well, and then I just kind of never heard from them again. And it could have been that it just didn't work out, but they were like, we love you, we're just going to run this background check and we'll get right back to you. And I was like, all right, I'm never going to hear from these people again. And then sure enough, because it's like, they try and make me the counterpoint to these men's rights activists when the thing is like, these men's rights activists are joking about raping people, and I'm like, quote unquote, joking. And I'm like joking about the anger that comes from living in that world. And they really like to equate those two things. And it frustrates me because to me, I think I have more of a right to make those jokes about my than they do, So whatever.
You've been through more, so you've maybe earned
not even that. Like, it's just not even that I've been through more, but it's like, in terms of everyone's allowed to make whatever joke they want, but I'm allowed to call you an asshole. And their whole, like, you know, Nick DiPaolo thing is like, anybody who calls me an asshole is triggered while I call everybody else an asshole. And it's like, just be real about what you're doing. And we're all just trying to get our thoughts out there or whatever. And you're allowed to call me a feminist killjoy cunt, and I'm allowed to call you a piece of shit, you know? And it's like, both of those things are technically allowed, but in their mind, freedom of speech is only them and, you know, not me.
Yeah, there's a real lack of self-awareness. God, I've been talking about
It's annoying.
I've been talking about him a lot.
I don't even know how I got into this. I'll just like launch him.
Oh no.
Sorry. Hi everybody.
Oh no, it's all good. It's all part of the overall oeuvre that we are both entrenched in at this point. You much more than me, because I've never had, like, every time the only people I've had to block on the internet who have for like harassment have been members of my own family. So
same.
that's about all I don't
even block
right
anybody
now.
anymore, because like blocking weirdly gives them a win. Like, I did Dylan Marin's podcast, Conversations with People Who Hate Me, which is a really cool podcast where he like basically connects trolls with the people that they're trolling, because it's like a bunch of people screaming at each other in cars, and, you know, you're forgetting the person you're honking at in traffic is a person, but it's on the internet, and there's a whole lot of, like, you know, just like sexist and racist and homophobic elements to it. But so he connected me with this guy who found out about the Men Are Scum thing and like freaked out and messaged me, because that's what happens. I had to explain to these reporters, like, every time you write this story up, a bunch of men just read one line and think that I'm like out here cutting their dicks off or something, and like message me like, how dare you, and you're the sexist, and just all this shit that just shows like how truly sheltered a lot of them are. And this guy, you know, we talked, and it was a good episode, but I realized that all they want is a reaction. Either way, positive, negative, quote tweet with an insult. That's why it's like when people do the slam dunks on the Ben Shapiro, Tommy Lauren, it's like that's all they want. They're truly the kid in class who negative attention, anything that gets the class staring at them is a win. And they've made whole businesses off of it. And so that was like a couple years ago, and I've had a kind of change in my mentality where just me personally, like, I don't try and block or do anything that shows that I've seen them at all. And, you know, I just mute, but it can be hard. Like, my podcast co-host Ray Sani said, and this is like, am I allowed to curse? Because it's about to be a bad curse.
Fuck yeah.
But like she said, and this made sense to me in my mind about internet trolls, because people, especially men, no offense, do this thing that comes from a good place where they are like, just ignore it. And it's really a lot easier said than done, because especially when it's like when some sort of big troll funnels all of his little trolls at you for a few days.
Right.
And my podcast co-host, Ray Sani, said, it's like somebody calling your mom a cunt for no reason, where a part of you is like, obviously they're calling my mom a cunt because they want me to react. Why else would you call somebody's mom a cunt?
Of course.
But at the same time, you're calling my mom a cunt. I can't just sit here, you know, and like let you say this stuff. And so, you know, we have this whole just bad, what's it called? Bad faith, you know? Like,
yeah, I think that's what it's called. Like, there's no, the guise of like an actual conversation is disingenuous.
Exactly. And then you spend so much time arguing these sort of like logical fallacies with them, people who know that. And so anytime they're taking of yours is a win. Anytime you ignore them, they can make that a win. It's like a really tricky thing we're in when you're fighting against somebody whose only goal is to piss you off, to get a reaction, when there's really nothing deeper than that in a lot of ways. Like when you're looking at somebody dumbfounded, how could they support Trump? And it's like, usually that's the thing. That's the thing that nobody wants to name, is it's this sick sort of desire just to piss people off. And that's it. There's nothing deeper than that. I'm happy when you're mad, period. So any sort of like, oh, I'm worked up about guns because kids keep dying. They're like, oh, you're so mad. Look at you. You're so mad. And you're like, yeah, I am mad. Like, and the more mad you get, the more they sort of just ridicule. So I don't know. I feel like that's all a cycle with the trolling, like how like Twitter's just become such a, not a different place, but it feels like it's exponentialized since Trump and like all this stuff with the trolls.
Yeah, because it's at the forefront of, I think, everyone's mind, because it's just a constant barrage of shit every single day.
Yeah.
I remember the other thing I wanted to say about you, related to journalism, and that I hate the way the news cycle and I hate the way a lot of article journalists write. I'll just say article writers, because I feel like journalism is a very separate thing. Like, these people aren't Walter Cronkite or Dan Rather.
Or maybe they wanted to be, but then they were like, we need 500 articles by 5 p.m. Go.
Right. And so to have your entire, like, 9 or 10 years of hard work of stand-up comedy reduced to, oh, you're the kill all men lady, I imagine that's fucking irritating, because it's like, I've got all these other jokes that aren't related to that, and you're gonna just define me by this one thing that happened.
Not even that, but it's like they just like make it whatever the original joke was, which wasn't a major part of my act. Not only that, but then when they reduce me to it, it's like it comes from my parents too, where I'm like, my mom will like disclaimer. It's the disclaimer where it's like, oh my God, like Marcia, you'll like her. She hates men. And it's like, yeah, that's part of the joke. Like, and part of the joke is like, I just don't take a lot of shit, especially from men or whatever. But I still do too. Like, a lot of it's just like trying to be self-deprecating about how angry I got as a woman. And like, this one guy came up to me. I like talked about this recently, where this sound guy, this Australian sound guy, came up to me, and I don't know why it's important that he's Australian, but and he came up to me after the show. He's like, I really like how your set sort of makes fun of feminism. I'm like, no, you're not getting the joke. And then instead of being like, oh, sorry if I misunderstood that, he was basically like, no, like as if I was wrong about my own jokes. But so that's, people are going to interpret whatever you do. But it's annoying, the disclaimer, because what was happening a lot, and what still happens sometimes, was I was being brought up on stage with, this next girl thinks all men should die. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcia Belsky. And it's like, then I got to spend my first 2 minutes in recovery from what just makes me seem like a deeply hateful person. And it's like, you know what? Or not even if you don't think that's hateful, at the very least hacky.
Yeah.
Because
you have a handicap before the set even starts.
Yeah, because it's like, it's hard to explain, where it's like, we're seeing feminist humor being put on a mainstream platform for the first time, and that has a lot of bad with it, along with a lot of avenues open, So it's like, you're not going to have a bunch of women doing a bunch of jokes about their point of view and it's quote unquote perfect. You haven't had men doing jokes about their point of view that are perfect, And so it's just hard, because like, it makes it seem like I'm stopping at the obvious joke, which is
right.
And it's like, that's not really ever what I tried to do, And if I ever did it, then so what? I'm a hack. We all are. But it's hard, because also it's like, they always want to make it so that both sides are equally hateful. They want to make it that Black Lives Matter is the same thing as the KKK. They want to make it that joking misandry is the same thing as violent misogyny. So any example they can use on the other side to have those be the black and whites, they do. And I just feel like they kind of put me into that. They saw an opportunity to be like, oh, men are scum. Girl gets banned from Facebook for calling men scum. And then it's just a really easy way for them to start a quote unquote debate based on nothing.
And then that gets people clicking.
Exactly. It's all about the clickbait. Exactly.
Yeah. So. It's exhausting.
Yeah. I mean, I liked the press because it called Facebook's attention to it, but it was just a little, people kept being like, oh, it must be nice, like the press. And I, as a comedian, I didn't like it, because I'm like, I don't want that to be what you see when you Google me.
Exactly. That's something like, and this is like the one bit of advice that I think I listened to my dad when I was younger, and this idea of what you like, he used Carlos Santana as an example. Like, people only ever think, if you of Carlos Santana is like he's great at guitar. So as a comedian, you generally like we're all trying to angle different ways to get attention because stand-up is just not consumed as much as it used to be. Like no one watches specials. No one is just clicking through YouTube. I don't think like they used to be. So there's all these. You're thinking about how can I get some sort of attention, but we all would want attention for our jokes, not just some offhanded thing that is a part of you, but is not representative of the whole.
Right, because it's like they're gonna reduce you however they can. So it's like, yeah, but I've kind of accepted it. It's like, what can you do? You can't control it, and the whole thing was like kind of it's hard because the actual men are scum thing was taken not really out of context, but they didn't let me explain the context, and it's sort of like, yeah, it's exactly. I want people to Google me and just see like the musicals I've written and like stuff like that. I don't want them to see this one thing because then it becomes this both sides like, well, I don't support sexism against women and I don't support sexism against men. And it's like, yeah, there's a reason why they had to like sue for gender discrimination against women first. Like it's just tiresome. It's tiresome.
Yeah. And that's not even stuff I'm interested in talking about because you performed at the Kennedy Center and I think that's very cool. So I kind of want to trace that. I want to get up to the musical. So I kind of want to just I know a little bit about you. You're originally from the Midwest.
I'm from Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm. Now, what did your parents do that led them to Oklahoma?
So my parents are both law professors, and I was born actually in Albany, New York.
Uh-huh.
My dad's Philly Jew. My mom's from D.C., and they are both law professors. They met at the University of Florida. Mm-hmm. And then went to Albany, and then my dad got a job as the dean at the University of Tulsa Law School. So we moved down there, and that's where I was raised. And then when I was like right when I graduated high school, they moved to Akron, Ohio, which is now where my family is. Yeah.
Okay. I've spent some time in Oklahoma City, but I don't know Tulsa super well. There's one very cool my memory of Oklahoma City. I was there for a wedding. There's one very cool street that has like some cool like cupcake shops and stuff. There's a small soccer team that has a store that I got some stuff at,
mm-hmm.
and then I remember seeing a lot of closed Planned Parenthoods.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Oklahoma City. So is Tulsa like the bigger city or is Tulsa like the small town compared to Oklahoma City?
So Oklahoma City is bigger. Oklahoma City is bigger than Tulsa. There's about 3 million people in the whole state. Oklahoma City has a little over 1 million in the whole area.
Uh-huh.
Tulsa has like 800,000, including like all the suburbs and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting because it's like Tulsa and sort of Oklahoma City too, because the University of Oklahoma is down there in Norman. Tulsa is like pretty liberal considering. It's like a very
mm-hmm.
conservative type of liberal. It's like a Christian liberal. It's like I'm pro-life and pro like choice, sort of wishy-washy. And it's interesting because you have this whole mix of like just, liberal people, non-religious people, religious people, and then you have the mega churches, like especially once you go out further in town a little bit. A lot of mega churches. I'm Jewish, and so like there was like a small but mighty Jewish community. It's bigger than you would think. It's like 2,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
And a few like powerful families, I guess, so to speak. And Tulsa's an interesting town because in the 1920s, it was the oil capital of the world. So there was like this big oil boom.
Yeah.
And in the 1920s, Tulsa was like this big booming city all the way up to like the 50s and 60s. And then the oil dried up. And there's still a lot of oil business down there, but it's mm-hmm. just now everything's in like North Dakota, South Dakota, like Alaska.
Right. It all moved north.
Yeah. So, and same, that's like what's happening in Texas too, is like there's so much oil and natural gas business in Texas, but a lot of it's like drying up, but like the businesses are still there, mm-hmm. fracking and like,
sure.
whatever.
Yeah.
So it was interesting because you have like I had a lot of cool friends. I really feel like growing up in a place like that, I always say we like had to develop personalities because there wasn't anything else to do.
Yeah,
you know.
I agree. I agree with that. I'm from a town of 800.
Oh wow.
Is where I grew up. And all of my
Where's that? In Maryland?
In Maryland. I grew up in a town called St. Leonard. I moved there from an even smaller town called Lusby after my grandfather died. So we're basically like we were like the suburban version of living off the grid.
Right.
Like we had well water and stuff like that.
Wow. You're like the village.
Somewhat, yeah. And then all of my friends' houses were like a 20-minute drive away. So I was just kind of
I knew people like that.
In my room with my imagination.
Do you have a lot of dogs?
Yeah, I had one dog growing up, and then he died, and I was sad, and I didn't want another dog. And then after I moved out, my mom got 2 dogs.
I had like my friend who lived out in the country was the first time I had seen like outdoor dogs. Like, I mean, I knew people who kept their dogs in the backyard, but this is the first time I had seen like 6 dogs in like a big fenced in like area.
I didn't live like that, but I do know people who did. So yeah, it's definitely comparable. But yeah, same way. I was like consuming all my pop culture via Amazon.com. That's how I was like discovering new bands, and was like whatever was being sold at Walmart, and then like big deal would be to go across to St. Mary's County, go to the Target, like holy shit. Mm-hmm. So I vibe with you on that. Is like you have to develop like you develop your more of a, I feel like you have a bigger imagination when there's not a lot of stimulation.
Exactly.
Around you. So when you were in okay, so you're the daughter of Jewish law professors. Did they teach the same kind of law or different law?
Different law. My dad does like constitutional law, environmental law, and he used to be a prosecutor. And my mom does. She taught women's studies. She does law about domestic violence and kind of dark things. So yeah, she worked with a lot of domestic abuse victims and things like that.
Mm-hmm. And so it seems like the roots of your political activism were seeded early on.
They were. I come from like a brassy female family, like because my mom and my aunt are both like. I mean, I tell people, and I like had to stop telling guys I was trying to date. I would be like, "Joke's on you! I'm the quiet one in my family," and they're like, "Oh Jesus, I'm out."
No, that's my experience with my fiance.
Yeah, when they meet me and they're like, "You loud bitch," and then I'm like, when I'm with my family, I do not hardly. I mean, I still get a word in, but I've learned that I have to shout to do it. My family is very loud. And yeah, so my grandma on my mom's side was a economic reporter for the New York Times early on in the 70s, and she worked for like the Washington Post and other places very early. She went back to work in the 50s, and that was like very not common, and well, I mean, I guess I should say not common amongst certain, like she was. Her dad was not educated, but she went to college, and she went to college during the war, so she was the editor at her newspaper because all the men were away. And she was just like incredibly smart. She went to college when she was 16. Her name's Eileen Shanahan, and she became pretty well known in her field, and then she was a part of this group of women in the 70s who sued the New York Times for equal pay. And they were actually being sued by women and by minorities at the same time. And then some of those women were involved in both of the lawsuits because they were female minorities being paid at the bottom, like 2% of the company, no matter what they did. And the excuse was sort of, my Nana at the time was one of the top economy reporters in DC, and just sort of known for being like a ball buster. And she found out she was getting paid the same amount as the secretaries, basically. And then when she went to her boss, what the hell is going on? And this was a common thing that this was a common thing they said that I thought that they didn't say anymore. And I've actually been seeing things on Twitter that quite a lot of married women still get told this, where they justified them paying her so little because her husband has a job. And these men who support their wives need to make more because their wives don't work. And she was like, that doesn't matter. I do my job. I deserve to get paid. And they were basically the New York Times, and they still do this while publicly presenting a very liberal, progressive face, behind doors is actually quite regressive and fighting to keep people in their place. And that was their experience. The lawsuit eventually got settled, which was more or less considered a win.
Yeah.
And they wrote a book about it called Girls in the Balcony, because the DC press corps up until I think the 80s literally had female reporters in a balcony away from the politicians while the men mingled on the floor during the press corps moments. So, yeah, I come from interesting women.
Yes.
Yeah. And I feel like, but it's funny because growing up, like my mom was obviously uber feminist, and I used to yell at her that she was sexist against men. And I'd be like, you hate men and da-da-da. And then, now it's like, now look at me. And I think it's maybe I just had to learn it for myself, as a lot of, I feel like women get radicalized with age because experience kind of adds up and things like that.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. Like the number of things that my dad said to me, like when he and my mom were getting divorced, that I'm like, you are full of shit. And and then I've had a couple of rocky relationships. Like, I'm not going to call him and tell him that what he said makes sense.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, just that there's that, or just the idea of like, especially when I started stand up and I was like, oh, this guy's a hack and that's boring. And then I'm just like, oh God. This world.
I know I talk too much shit, and I got told like very early where it's like, you know your place, because it's like when I first started doing stand-up, I would like just immediately start talking shit, and then it's like you gotta wait to be good before you can just like because also I feel like every time I'll start to feel a little hoity-toity and start talking shit about other people's comedy, I'll like just have the hardest bomb of my life and be like, you deserve that, you stupid bitch, don't talk about other people.
I feel that way about like really like avant-garde people are trying to be like the next Andy Kaufman or what have you. I'm like, I've never seen you tell a joke, so I don't know if you can. I think like,
right, is it a choice? Or did somebody tell you one time when you were bombing that if worse comes to worse, just be Andy Kaufman?
Right. And then I'll go the other way, like the people who want to be like the like open micers who clearly love Patrice O'Neal or Bill Burr. I don't like applying rules to comedians, because I don't think there should be any rules in comedy. But the one thing I wish was a rule is that you should be able to do 5 minutes of clean observational or personal humor before you try to go and be the next like Bill Burr.
Of course. Well, what I think they miss about Bill Burr and Patrice, because they're different in the way, because I think they do two different things. Because Patrice did, and this is just my opinion, like I'm not some like expert, but
totally,
Patrice did this thing where you disagree with him even past the punchline, but you're still laughing. Maybe you don't disagree with him, but even if you do disagree with whatever he's saying, you're still laughing, and you kind of, even if you disagree with him to the end. Bill Burr does this thing where he starts his jokes where you think you disagree with him, and then he twists it. So he starts a joke, everybody's thought about hitting their kids. And then by the end, you're like, everybody has thought about hitting their kids. You agree with him. He's twisted it because he's not making fun of kids being hit. He's making fun of parents, bad parenting.
Yeah.
So he twists the joke where you originally think, like, not to be like, cliche, but like he would, if Bill Burr heard me like analyzing him like this, he would destroy me. But
sure.
It's like he twists the joke so that you think he's punching down, but he's actually punching up. A lot of the time. And when you see these guys, so I don't know about guys imitating Patrice, because sometimes they do, and it's like, oh no, you're just sexist, not funny.
Yeah,
you're just objectifying the woman in the front row, and you're not even being funny while you're doing it.
Yeah, you're missing all of the nuance because you're just hearing the.
Yeah, and you're not likable. I mean, the
words.
thing, Patrice O'Neal is likable to his core. Likable, charming people can get away with all sorts of shit. And, you know, I watched it. I was a big fan. I watched his stand-up, and now sometimes I'm like, this guy's, you know, fucking whatever. But then I'm like, I'm still laughing, and it's like, whatever. And he would always, like, make it sweet in a way in the last moment and, like, things like that.
Yeah.
He had a real sweet side, and he obviously, anybody he was making fun of, he cared about. And, like, you know, it kind of did this thing where it's like, yeah. But with Bill Burr, a lot of the guys who are impersonating him, they do the first part, but they don't do the twist because they don't understand that he's doing the twist. So they just say the hacky, sexist, bigoted shit, and then there's no twist, and then nobody laughs, and then they go, what, too edgy for you? And it's like, no, it just wasn't a good joke.
It's like the joke isn't done.
Because anything can be funny. I've heard rape jokes from men that are funny because it's not what you think it's going to be. There's something creative there, whatever. It's only these like guys making these lazy ass jokes going, nobody laughs anymore. And it's like, I don't know if did they ever, you know? I don't know. Maybe they did.
How many times has that joke bombed? Oh, it's bombed every time you've told it? Well, let's do the
I love that.
the Venn diagram on this.
Well, and the idea that these guys will have the audacity in the middle of a bomb to go on stage and go, oh, you're not laughing because of PC culture. When these are the same men, I have never once in my life after a joke has bombed go, do you not like that because I'm a woman? And if I did, they would chase me out of the club with pitchforks. And it's like, you know what? You're doing the same thing. You're blaming it on something that you can't know if that's what it is. Maybe it's just not funny. Maybe that audience isn't laughing at me, not because they hate women, but because I'm bombing, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, if you want me to take responsibility, which I have, you take responsibility, but they're not willing to do that. Meanwhile, they want to claim that people like me just want handouts in comedy, can't handle bombing, haven't done the work. And it's like, I was doing these open mics when I first moved to New York for years. I was doing 5, 10, 15 open mics a week, you know, the work they wanted me to do. But once I'm on that stage, if I tell one bad joke, all of that work is invalid because I just got that spot because I'm a woman.
I know. It's fucking stupid.
It's changing, but it's like, what's interesting is that we found our own spaces where we didn't have to, because, you know, before the internet, people talk shit about social media. I don't know if without social media, if I wouldn't still be in these comedy clubs trying to make myself something they want me to be, as opposed to what I want to be, something that fits in their sort of like fuckable little sister mold, you know? And I could do it maybe if I had put the effort into it, but I started putting my effort into these other spaces that really appreciated me. And then once I do that, I'm like, well, I'm going to go to these places that want me, which is what they seem to want because, you know, they're always like, either work or don't complain or get out. So now we've found all these other avenues where we don't need them, and they're furious. Now all of a sudden we're killing comedy. Now all of a sudden safe spaces. Now all of a sudden blah, 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 blah. It's like, so I'm not allowed to make my own spaces because that's sexist. I'm not allowed to talk my truth in your spaces because that's sexist. So what am I supposed to do?
Right. You're supposed to do whatever.
I'm supposed to not do comedy. That's the unspoken thing. I'm supposed to not do comedy and not complain that I can't do comedy. Or I'm supposed to do comedy by their rules and always, always, always appreciate that they even let me be there.
I know.
So it's like, that's changed. And I think that's what they don't want to accept, is that I don't have to be so grateful that they come up to me and say, not bad. You know, it's like, and there are ones that I love. It's like, they act like it's all of them. It's like, no, because I fucking love Colin Quinn. I love Eddie Pepitone. Like, I love a lot of these. I love Anthony Jeselnik. Like, it's like, you know, you can't tell me that I'm offended.
Yeah, I just watched his most recent special. I thought that closing story was really well done.
I didn't watch it yet. I can't watch stand up at home because I can't relax when I watch it. So I because I'm very, you know what I mean? It's like I got to really sit down and like do it.
Yeah. Okay, so you're in Oklahoma now. Did you know you were gonna, like, when you were in high school or when you were coming into your own in Oklahoma? Did you know you were gonna be a creative person or in comedy at that point?
I didn't know consciously like where it was gonna go. As a kid, I was very kind of like a cowardly performer. So I was really into musical theater, loved to sing, loved to act, but kind of always not choked, but I wasn't that good. I would try and do comedy monologues and stuff. I just, I wasn't that good. And my mom's the opposite of a stage mom. So like, I'd be like, Mommy, how was it? And she's like, it's stiff. And, but then there was like this something missing because I would do really well. It took a long time to figure out, which I think any kid that like knows they want to do comedy at like 12, especially now with YouTube, it's like I hope they just wait because I do think it's just better. Right. And comedy, I feel like a little fucked up for how long I've been doing it. So it's like I feel like if you're a true kid when you do it, it's a hard world to be in for so long. And
when you say kid, do you mean like, 16, 17? Or are you talking like 12?
Or even like younger, like, because, they have these like kids who are like these YouTube stars and stuff early. But okay, so for me.
I don't think that's a good idea. But.
No, yeah. But so I knew I wanted to do something. I kind of thought it was musical theater, but at the same time, I knew in terms of just acting and stuff, I didn't have that. I wasn't talented enough because the musical theater people, I mean, can just sing on a whole different level.
Oh my God. Yeah. I majored in theater. So I know all these, I know all this.
That's the thing. Yeah. And I also,
in college, we only did one musical.
Urinetown?
Urinetown.
We did that in mine too.
Oh yeah?
That's so funny. I love Urinetown because they do the fake Les Mis. Any Les Mis joke I love.
Yeah, I love parroting Les Mis. That was probably the edgiest musical that my college did. And in high school, it was like Crazy for You and The Pajama Game and Singing in the Rain, like the parents.
Yes.
Perennial parent
Very
favorites.
classic, yes. Very high sung female voices that like, ooh. But yeah, so I didn't know. I knew I wanted something, and I actually remember this really deep-seated fear or like almost resignation that I was gonna be like one of these people who maybe didn't find what I was good at. I was like very scared that was gonna happen because I was sort of jack of all trades where I could be pretty good at a lot of things, but I was waiting for like something I could be great at and or something that I felt I could be great at. And then I did my acting program at my college and it did not work out. I got in a fight with the teacher and it made it very clear that like I could stay in the program all 4 years, but they were not going to cast me because I was probably ornery and I always had a hard time sort of not being my own boss and whatever. I don't know if I would be a pleasant person to work with. I don't think I'm like a diva or anything, but I know I want things my way, especially as a performer.
Yeah.
And so then I was obsessed with stand-up growing up, like truly obsessed. So it's kind of funny that I missed it as like a possibility. I think because I didn't, and a lot of people are like this, that's why they ask such annoying questions about comedy, because nobody really understands how it works, and it takes you a long time to figure out while you're doing it. I mean, like I'm 10 years in and there's still new things about the quote unquote business that I'm learning every day. And all it is, no matter who you are, is just showing up at a bar and doing an open mic. And there's no other thing that's really like that, which is what I loved about it, because I'm not good at auditioning. But once I'm up there and I have that audience, I just kind of like knew I could get them or whatever. And so I had a fake ID. And I was in Portland, Oregon for college at Lewis and Clark. And I had a fake and I just started doing comedy at 19 and told everybody that I was like 22 or whatever. And it was funny because I was one of these kids where when I was 15, I thought I was 30. So I was like always wanting to be older, acted older or whatever.
Sure.
Hung out with the older people that I worked with at like my grocery store job. And then so when I was 19, I just really felt like I could sell it. Like I was like, nobody's going to know. And it was funny because this one comic, Gabe Dinger, one time we're sitting down and I'm 19 and he's talking shit about these 18-year-olds who everybody knows are 18 who are doing comedy. And he sits down with me and he's like, like some 18, 19-year-olds never going to tell me anything interesting about life. And I'm like, yeah, man, totally, you know? And he's not knowing that, like, I'm fully a new sophomore in college and just like, but it was a good escape for me because I didn't feel like I fit in a lot of the aspects of my college. It was like a small school, and comedy was this big, and like the scene in a way was this big escape for me and this way to find new friends. And yeah, so then started in Portland, and then
was Portland like the idea? Was Portland the Portland that we think of now, or was it not quite the hipster haven that it is
I'm sure
now?
it's a hipster haven if that's what you're looking for. It's interesting with Portland with me because anytime someone brings it up, especially when I'm on the East Coast, they're always like, Portland, that's fun. And I always want to bite my tongue and be like, just say something nice and change the conversation. Just say something nice. Like, but I always just end up devolving into talking shit because looking back, I had a lot of really positive experiences in Portland, and it's where I started comedy. You know, I can't really say that I regret anything at all. It's just an interesting thing for me because I came from Oklahoma, and I think I was kind of looking for this liberal haven. And I was like, everything liberal is good. And I didn't really believe this idea of the ultra liberal because I thought that was just somebody conservative being like progressivism is too much. I didn't understand about like the horseshoe theory of political ignorance. And so I got to Portland and I found out about anti-vaxxers, about people who don't put fluoride in the water, and about a truly segregated city and state. And, you know, in terms of gentrification, like, and, you know, I'm guilty. It's like I'm not absolving myself of being a part of any of this, but it's in terms of Portland, I mean, they've truly pushed the Black community further and further and further out to the point that people go, well, there's no Black people in Portland. And it's like, they're there. They have just had their community, you know, abused and pushed into this very small area that itself has now already become too expensive to live in. And then the people who are migrating there are mostly white. And so you have like an interesting history there because like Oregon like was, you know, everybody got there for the lumber industry, and the lumber industry like didn't it was the state didn't allow Black people until like the late 19th century, I'm sure. So I think. And so you see you see that. And I think it was interesting coming from Tulsa, where I'm from, was also a very segregated place. And it had the history of what they call now the Tulsa Race Massacre, which was like this huge, just horrible historic event where there's a area of town called Black Wall Street. It was the most booming business industrial area of Black America in the 20s, where basically they were like, here, we'll give you a city. And then they developed it. And then white people were so resentful that they destroyed the entire area. And that's Tulsa's history. So Tulsa has this really dark, violent racial history. And so and then in Oregon, it was interesting because there it's just, in Portland itself, it's just very, very white. And so it was like interesting seeing a conservative racist place that'll just be racist to people's face, and then the difference between that and a sort of liberal but still all white area. So I don't know. So when I think back on Portland, it's just like something I can't ignore, where it's like there's this aspect of like white liberalism there that's like that's what the bubble is, where it's like it's almost a microcosm of like white liberalism that I was very much a part of. You know, I'm a white liberal. And so it was like it was just interesting. And I felt like with the comedy, there's this thing where they're like, yeah, we want like feminism and progress, and then like I get up there and they're like, oh, what we actually wanted was a guy's gal. But then it's like, you know, it's hard to know like how much you take personally, how much you project. Like, you know, I'm sure this is just my point of view.
I feel like the Pacific Northwest also brought us the raw water phenomenon.
What's that?
Oh, that's this trend that bunch of like I will describe as Portland-esque people of a Portland-esque mindset pay a lot more money for water that has not been treated or filtered in any way.
Yeah.
So it's like,
oh well, that's the thing is they don't put fluoride in the water.
And the raw, yes, but I think raw water is like dangerous. I'm reasonably positive that it's like very dangerous.
Yeah.
But it's like being sold as this like health
That's
thing.
what Portland is.
That's
it's like
that's
insane.
the microcosm of it as whole. So
it's the very left wing. Like I didn't understand about like ultra left wing white liberalism, and so like then seeing it where it's the weird water stuff, it's the unpasteurized milk, it's the eating raw meat, like, you know, just crazy shit where you're like, someone needs to get you off your commune and just tell you to. It's people not seeing doctors for cancer and thinking they can take supplements, you know. It's all sorts of just extremist stuff that I didn't understand coming from an area known for its other kind of extremism. Right. And then the racism was just, it just manifests very differently where it's like
it's not to your face, it's coded. It's that coded kind of racism.
Well, and even like when you're a white person, you see how white people act privately when there aren't people of color around, and the way that manifested the racism in the two different places was both bad, both different, where you had in Oklahoma people just saying racial slurs, people saying openly racist things and saying, I'm not sorry for it, whatever. In Oregon, you have the, like, you know, or like the touching people's hair. You have the ignorance of sort of the do-good liberalness, you know, where it's like, we just want to help, not by like hiring people in our office, but like, you know, and it's
right. We want to change the world, but we don't want to actually do anything.
Right. Or learn anything, or like, you know, or they always think that they're right instead of actually trying to hear how they're wrong, whatever. And it's like, yeah, I'm not perfect. Like, this is just my observations and what I like kind of privately bitch about with other people who also came from Portland and stuff like that. So
totally,
it's interesting, you know. Now it's like a weed town, and there's like weeds legal, and it was already like a stoner place, you know. So but
everybody's trying. Well, maybe that gets some people to chill out and like, you know what, I got to rethink some things. So how do we get from and you've been in, how long have you been in New York now?
Now I've been in New York like 6 years. Yeah, 2013.
Years.
So I moved,
from Portland to New York.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do we move from stand-up, from political stand-up comedy to musicals? To your writing musicals. Let's discuss that. It sounds like if you have a background in musical theater, this sounds almost like your creativity coming full circle.
Yeah, it feels very full circle, which is what's made me just feel so good lately, because I feel like it's this sort of other, like, stand-up felt like this thing that I had never thought of, that when I finally did think of it, I'm like, how did you miss this? And that's kind of how writing these little musicals so far has been for me, which is like, as a kid, I wrote this whole parody, a full hour-and-a-half long parody of Macbeth. That was like a modern parody for my 6th grade English class or whatever, for extra credit. And I was thinking about that because I've just been trying to connect back with things that I was naturally inclined to, that I feel like the world and adolescence like beat out of me. Because I'm a very social person, so I feel like I was like very embarrassed and very much like tried to be cool, and I'm trying to unlearn a lot of that about just liking what I like and doing what I like and not worrying about other people. And
that's what I'm trying to do now.
Yeah. It's really hard because it's something you're not supposed to talk about. You're supposed to just be like, I've always done what I like. And it's like, I haven't. I'm a socialized person, and you know.
I'm fully embraced how much I love anime.
Yeah.
Whereas I would have watched it all secretly in high school because I would have been called the freak.
I mean, yeah, you could have, like, I just admitted when I did this podcast a while ago, where like I was so obsessed with Broadway as a kid that I would go on these message boards and like literally send people money in the mail, like my allowance money. I'd send them like $5-10 cash in the mail or a money order. and they would send me back VHS bootlegs of Broadway shows recorded live in the theater, like illegally. So that's how I got to see all this stuff that I was obsessed with. I had like 90 million tapes of Rent. I had like Hairspray. I had You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. I had just like every chorus line, like, you know, all this stuff that I just thought I'd never be able to see. And the idea that somebody would find out felt like my life would be over. Like, I hid it from when my friends were like, oh, did you tell like one friend? No, I told nobody because I was so scared that people would be like, you're such a freak. Like, what are you doing? And now it's just funny. And then now I talked about it and I had all these people message me like, oh my God, like I did that. I'm like, what? And it's just crazy, this early internet world that existed when we were like kids. But
totally.
yeah, so I moved to New York a year after college because I had a friend who was living here and I just finally got the chance to live. And because, you know, it's really hard to move to New York if you don't have a place ready for you. So when that happened, I was like, I have to take this because otherwise I know it's going to be like, and I felt really stuck in Portland. I was working, at that time I was working at a restaurant. Before that I had been working at a liquor store, and it was just like, Portland's just such a floater town. You can really float forever, but it's kind of like somebody's like, yeah, I'm a filmmaker. And you're like, cool, let's shoot something on Monday. And they're like, oh, Monday? Yeah, no, I don't, you know, and it's kind of like, it felt really hard for me to find my people. And
yeah, because you strike me as someone who's like, I have a list of things I need to get done, and why aren't you already working on it?
I kind of am. Like, I'm kind of a lazy oaf coupled with that. So it's like a hard thing where like I'm like very anxious and like need to be productive, but at the same time, if given to my natural inclination, I would be doing nothing 100% of the time.
I think a lot of comedians are like that. So I don't
That's
think you're
so
alone.
many comments.
I don't think you're alone on that. One thing I wanted to ask you about, you wrote the music and the book for your Handmaid's Tale parody?
So me and Melissa Stokowski wrote the lyrics and the book, and then the music was written by our accompanist, arranged by Fernanda Douglas is her name.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is the book for in musical theater? Like if I write the book for a musical theater piece, what is that?
So that's lyrics and dialogue.
Lyrics and dialogue.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then music is the arrangement.
Gotcha. Excellent. And how because I know when we originally started talking about doing this, I think you were getting ready to do the Kennedy Center shows.
Oh yeah.
So how did those come about, and how those shows go?
Yeah, I mean, that was incredible. We wrote this show called Handmaid's Tale the Musical. And it was the way that I write. I do also a musical project with my friend Isabel Martin. We have a band called Free the Mind, and that's how all of this started, because I like never sang besides in front of like karaoke. That's why musical theater didn't work out. I was very nervous singing. And that's really changed a lot.
Yeah,
I
listened to some of your stuff. You have a good indie rock voice.
Thank you.
I think I was thinking here's the line I would use. I would describe you as a riot girl, moldy peaches.
Ooh, I love that. Oh, great compliment. Wow. I mean, if 14-year-old Marcia could hear that. But yeah, so we wrote this musical, and I honestly, like, as corny as it is, like, I was inspired a little bit by Lin-Manuel Miranda, because I saw that if you're like a talented writer who can see yourself in a part that nobody's casting you in, you can just write that part for yourself. And I'm like, respect. And so I really wanted to do a musical. I was really inspired by Jordan Temple, did Hidden Fences, and the Three Busy Debras did this show at Carnegie Hall. And I saw both of those around the same time. And I was like, this is what you've always wanted to do. And the only thing that's stopped you is some idea that somebody's going to ask you to do it. And nobody is going to ask you to do it. You have to just do it. And Melissa and I had this idea about doing a Fiddler on the Roof parody about the L train shutdown, where Tevye is forced to move to Astoria because of the L train shutdown. And then the L Train shutdown got pushed back. So we were like, we had this other idea to do this Handmaid's Tale musical because I just thought it was so funny. Like everything that they've made into a musical, literally every single TV show and movie has been made into a musical. And so I'm like, let's do Handmaid's Tale, because I think they actually made the Handmaid's Tale into like an opera, but obviously if they made a musical about it, it'd be very serious. And I wanted it to be about what it would be like if the girls that I knew in Brooklyn became handmaids, because obviously in real life it'd be horrific, but in like where our story, where we get to give the girls agency still, it's just hilarious because it's like seeing all these girls who are like, what? Like, no, you know?
Right.
And got to parody the show. Like, we had the character, the love interest is extremely hot Nick, because when you're watching the Hulu show, he's just distractingly hot, where a part of you is like, honestly, Offred, like, I wouldn't even be that mad. And so then we did that show. We did like a bunch of sold out shows in New York. It was just like a dream come true. We did Union Hall and like Bell House and Caveat and a bunch of venues around the city. And then this woman I know, Jen Tisdale, works for Brightest Young Things in DC.
Yeah, I know Jen.
Yeah. And she was basically like, we're doing this festival called the Benson Ball, and it's Tig Notaro's founded it. I don't know if she still runs it. And basically we want Handmaid's Tale the musical. And I'm like, great. Like, I kind of figure that we're either going to do a couple songs or they're going to have us do the full show in like a Bell House type Union Hall theater. Yeah. I mean, we've done everything.
Like
we've done
Black
huge.
Cat.
Yeah, like we've done like big theaters where we need the like wireless mics. We've done Union Hall where we're just like yelling. And then she sends us the contract and she goes, I'm going to have Kennedy Center send you the contract. And I'm like, what? And then I just didn't think it was like that Kennedy Center for a long time. And then finally I'm talking to my mom, who's from DC, and she's like, no, John F. Kennedy Center. That is the Kennedy Center. You are performing at the Kennedy Center. And my mom, God bless her heart, was so funny because she's used to me posting these things online that are like performing at Madison Square Garden tonight. And so I posted about the Kennedy Center before telling her. Because whenever I get things that are like a big deal, I never think of it as a big deal. I don't know if it's like a survival mechanism. It's only afterwards that people's reaction to it tells me that this was like a big thing.
Yeah.
And so I posted about it being like, this is cool. And then my mom texts me all caps, I assume the Kennedy Center is a joke. And I said, no, we're actually performing there. And she's like, oh my God. And like, you know, really excited. It was the coolest thing in the world. And we sold out 2 shows.
Nice.
And that was all we were slotted for, as 2 shows on the festival, and sold them both out. The audience is like, we couldn't have asked for better. It was because I was a little bit worried. I'm like, they'll come, but are they going to get it? You know, it's a lot of sort of like millennial-ish jokes.
Totally.
It just did so well. And it was such a dream come true to be on that stage. We're a very minimal production. Like, we have props and stuff, but we don't really have a set. And yeah, so then, and now we're doing the Fiddler on the Rooftop Bar, which is our parody musical of Fiddler on the Roof, where I play Tevye, because I'm just giving myself all my dream parts that I wanted, you know?
Yeah. Well, you get to that point, and that's what I'm doing with my podcast, is you get to that point where, and I think, like, I spent a long time like trying to get good so I could maybe like start getting check spots at New York Comedy Club or places like that, and then realizing that for whatever reason, timing, that's not happening, so I've got to create my own noise.
Exactly.
And again, something that I can be creatively fulfilling, because you know, we have lots of friends that run successful shows, and I don't want to get to the point where if I can't do my friend's show, that's gonna like wear on me. That's just needs to be a thing. And I always know I have this. And always knowing you've got this, I think, is good. I know you got to get out of here, but I got one more question that I'd want to ask you. It's kind of like this is personal question, because I try to
PQ.
I try to reconfigure my thinking around stuff as well. I'm curious, given that I would consider yourself a like comedian first, but activist maybe second or third. I feel like that's also a part of your identity, now that I know a little bit about your your life. My question is, do you ever get cynical, and how do you stave off the cynicism when you look at the way the world is operating currently?
Yeah, I don't consider myself an activist at all. I feel guilty when that title is put on me. Because I feel like I just talk a lot of shit, and that's kind of all I do. Like, I donate money and but I, and I try and do little things here and there, but I know activists, and to be an activist is I don't think that being an activist can come second to anything, because it's a real commitment. It's like people dedicate their whole lives to, I don't know. I think, what it is that I think that when you commit to being an activist, part of it is committing to bringing up the unpleasant topics a lot. And I think that I took the coward's way out of only bringing those up in pleasant ways, which they say. And my activist friends are like, it's important to do comedy and stuff like that, just because people only want to hear it in a certain way. But I still feel like too much of a chicken shit about some stuff I really want to talk and post about, because it's not funny, or have I posted too much about this, and are people going to doubt that I'm a comedian because I care too much politically? I still feel like I balk a little bit too much on that. But with the cynicism, it's hard because I do feel really cynical a lot. My day job, I work with a charity that helps Holocaust survivors. And so that has showed me how long this stuff takes to undo. And that's what's so hard about every evil thing that we're seeing, is that you can't fight everything. Part of it is the exhausting game of fascism is just wearing you down. And I just feel really scared. So I think it's hard too, because it's cynicism. I do feel cynical because I think that we as privileged people at the end of the day will be okay wherever you are on the scale of privilege. I think that, you never know. And I mean, that's what happens with these stuff, is I think people underestimate how much it will actually affect them personally. Mm-hmm. But I already know that it's just irreparably damaged so many people, this sort of reversal 3 steps back that we've had. And just all of Trump, all of the damages of unregulating and deregulating. And it's like, it took a long time to undo after Reagan. It's going to take a long time. And we never fully did. I mean, it's like you can connect direct things. The oil spill happened because Reagan deregulated the people who doing the oversight on offshore drilling to make it so that the companies themselves are doing the oversight. That's one little thing of deregulation that caused such a huge problem. And now look at what we're deregulating and all the judges we're pointing in. So it's like, I don't even know if cynical begins to describe it, because at the end of the day, the only thing that keeps me at peace is just saying, it's like therapy, like with panic attacks, like just going through the fear, going through the what if. And it's like, what if I can't fix the world, and at the end of the day, I just have to be happy that I'm alive and I have a family and I love them. And, that's where my cynicism takes me to. But I do feel, I don't know how to combat the cynicism, because every day I feel deeply just angry and cynical that, I don't know. But I will say, I do feel like in the end, progress is sort of like a 3 steps forward, 2 3/4 steps back. So it feels like you're taking such a big step back, but you are taking a little step forward in the long run. But I mean, not to end this on such a dark note, but it's like, I think that what people don't want to talk about is that in that fight, people die, people are hurt, people are irreparably damaged for life. And that's what we're seeing now with all the stuff that's going on. So it just fucks me up. It just makes me fucking mad. And I want to try and still be funny throughout it. But even with comedy, I think about, what world are we going to be in 2 years? Right. We don't know as Americans what it would be like to fall in that way culturally and in terms of our daily lives. And I just think that we have no idea how much is going to change, whether it's going to change how much it already has.
Yeah. Like there's a real, like we're probably going to be like finding out shit's broken like years after this is all done. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
We'll like looking in the walls like, oh man, all this stuff is hidden in the walls.
Right. If their only goal is to destroy, they're always in the walls. Look in the walls.
Well, I just think of like I just always think of like 1984. It feels and looks bleak, but if it brings you to a sort of sense of gratefulness for the little things, that's probably not the worst thing that could happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say continuing to not shut up, which I know you won't.
Yeah, I mean they'll probably kill me first. Yeah, that's why it's interesting because you start to look at what they can't take from you, and that's been just a goal of mine, that it's like they can't take away my friends, they can't take away our joy. And the more, even like on a smaller scale, like when I let these like older guys in comedy or like Louis C.K. coming back, shit like that bother me, eventually I reach a point where I just go, they take up so much time in my brain, and part of their power is that I don't take up any time in theirs. And Trump's just that times a million, where it's like really a lot of what we can do besides still fighting, especially from a privileged position, is just still have each other, and like still connect and tell the truth to each other when like all these people are lying, and just tell myself that's, where my cynicism finds some relief, is just that I know the truth and they can't gaslight me. They can gaslight the world, and they will, and they can lead to really frustrating conversations where I'm talking with people on our side about, no, Ilhan Omar doesn't hate the Jews, and that gets really hard, the propaganda machine, how much it spreads to our own ranks,
Yeah.
And so yeah, but I do just know that, yeah, I'm just gonna keep speaking my mind and hopefully keep working to be able to articulate myself. But that can be really hard sometimes when you're emotional, and they play off that too, where they do horrible emotional things, hurt children, and then when you have an emotional reaction, it's that same thing I'm talking about earlier, where they're like, ha, got you. And it's like, yep, you got me. I'm mad that you're doing this. You got me. And they're like, that's what I thought. Got you. There's a fucking school shooting, and they're like, got you. You're like, fuck off.
Exactly. I think fuck off might be.
Fuck off. That could be the title of this app.
That might be a great way to end this. So it's marciabelsky.com.
Yes, marciabelsky.com. My Twitter is Marcia Belsky. My Instagram is Marcia SKY, Marcia Sky.
Awesome. Well, thank you for talking to me,
Thank
Marcia.
you, Will.
I
This is so
appreciate
fun.
it. Excellent.
Bye.
Okay, folks, that's our show for this week. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Marcia. I appreciate your time and your honesty and your candor. I also want to give a shout out to my awesome producer supporter on Patreon, Mary Beth Mooney. Thank you so much for the support. If you want to check out the reward tiers, it's patreon.com/awesomedisaster. You can leave a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. That's where we are located. And I appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to check out the links I have and the stuff I do and the show I make. So thank you guys again. I really appreciate that you're here. And I will see you guys next week between Awesome and Disaster. Take care, everybody.